But the statistics are that, up to 86% of people think they're eating a healthy diet. And I was in that same category. I thought I was eating a healthy diet, but I did not know. So I started practicing as I was taught. I was a physiatrist doing interventional spine, sports medicine, team doctor at Lehigh with the bobsled team, practicing every day as I'd been taught. Diagnosis, order studies, do procedures, write prescriptions. And I kept hearing every day my patients telling me the same thing. Dr. Stoll, can't you help me? I'm falling apart. And I thought it was the inevitable consequence of aging. It's just what happens as we get older. We get diseases, we get inflammation, our joints deteriorate, we have pain. That's why I'm here as a doctor, to try and manage these diseases so you can have some semblance of a quality of life as you age.
That's what we're taught to believe, right?
That's what we're taught to believe. You know that. And so I believe that too, because nobody taught me in medical school where disease came from, or that it could be suspended, prevented, or even reversed.
You're listening to the Visibly Fit podcast. Hey, I'm your host, Wendie Pett, and every week I'll give you holistic, practical solutions for everyday issues related to nutrition, healing, functional fitness, and behavior modifications. As a naturopath, fitness expert, and wellness coach for over 20 years, my goal is to empower you to reach for greater health and to rise up to your next level of living in mind, body, and spirit. You were created with greatness in mind. It's time to own it. Are you with me? Then let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome to the Visibly Fit podcast. I'm your host, Wendie Pett. And today's episode, you are going to be so excited and so blessed because there's a lot of confusion about what to eat and how to eat. And this expert says this expert says that. And so we're going to really dive in deep on whole food, plant-based eating. And I'm just so excited to have a dear friend on as well. But I'm going to introduce him really accordingly with reading his bio. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So it's Dr. Stoll, Dr. Scott Stoll. He is recognized as an international leader in lifestyle medicine and whole food plant-based nutrition. He's the co-founder of the Plantrician Project, the International Plant-Based Nutrition Healthcare Conference, the International Journal of Disease Reversal and Prevention, and the Regenerative Health Institute, a unique collaborative project with the Rodell Institute that integrates a regenerative vision of human health, agriculture, and the environment. He served as the chairman of the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at Coordinated Health for 16 years, a team physician for Lehigh University, and the United States Bobsled and Skeleton Team. And he was a member of the Whole Foods Scientific and Medical Advisory Board. Dr. Stoll is the chairman of the board for the Plantrician Project. And every year, Dr. Stoll hosts the very popular one-week total health immersions in Florida. And he helps attendees recover lost health, overcome addictions, and restore emotional balance. In addition to authoring several books and numerous scientific articles, Dr. Stoll has appeared on a wide variety of national television shows, including Dr. Oz, hosting a 2018 PBS special, Food as Medicine, and numerous documentaries, including Eating You Alive, Wait Till It's Free, and one of my very favorites, The Game Changers, as well as, that's not all, as well as being a published author and member of the 1994 Olympic bobsled team. He is a highly sought out after international speaker, and Dr. Stoll and his amazing family, they live in Franklin, Tennessee. So welcome to Visibly Fit, Dr. Scott Stoll. I like to call him my brother from another mother.
Yeah, that's right, Wendie. Thank you so much for the kind invitation. It is such an honor to be with you today. And, I know it's been a long time coming, and I'm so thankful that we have this time together this morning.
Oh my goodness. And in honor of you, I'm wearing the shirt that we hand out to the participants. It says, I survived the Dr. Stoll's immersion.
That is great.
So that is
a lot of fun times at those immersions, haven't we?
Oh my goodness. I can't believe how many I've had the privilege of being a part of, and I'm so grateful. You do such an amazing job. And I was trying to figure this out because how old is your youngest, Faith?
Faith is 9.
She's 9 now. So I believe it's been 8 years that I've been doing the immersions with you guys. So it's pretty amazing. and very fun, and the impact that you have made. And it's just awesome to be a part of that. But let me just kind of go immediately and ask the question, how long have you been whole food plant-based, and why?
How long do you have?
Yeah, we only have about 30 minutes.
Yeah, so, about 18 years we've been eating this way. And, it really started, actually, I have to always give my wife credit, my amazing wife. When I was in medical school, just after the Olympics, it was my second year of med school, and I came home one day and she said, I really think we need to change our diet. And I said, well, why do you think that? She said, I've been doing some reading and watching some programs, and I think we need to become vegetarian. So I just came out of the Olympics, and, it's meat, and it's like calories and protein. And I said to her, what in the world? I'm going to lose all of my muscle. Where am I going to get my protein? And I spent the rest of my life answering that question. So,
and you still do today.
I still do today. I asked that question, and my wife was so patient, and she just waited for me to finally catch up to her. And now, after 26 years of marriage, I've learned to listen to her the first time, because she usually has great discernment and is very wise. So, going fast forwarding through med school, through residency, I continued to eat the way that I ate growing up, which was, some vegetables, a salad, but a big chunk of meat, and something else on my plate, milk or chocolate milk or something for dessert. And I still had a sweet tooth, and I thought I was healthy, like so many people today. In fact, when I do surveys of the American population, and we all know the statistics on obesity and overweight, that, almost 70% of America is overweight or obese. Mm-hmm. But the statistics are that, up to 86% of people think they're eating a healthy diet. And I was in that same category. I thought I was eating a healthy diet, but I did not know. So I started practicing as I was taught. I was a physiatrist doing interventional spine, sports medicine, team doctor at Lehigh with the bobsled team. And, practicing every day as I've been taught. Diagnosis, order studies, do procedures, write prescriptions. And I kept hearing every day my patients telling me the same thing. Dr. Stoll, can't you help me? I'm falling apart. And I thought it was the inevitable consequence of aging. It's just what happens as we get older. We get diseases, we get inflammation, our joints deteriorate, we have pain. That's why I'm here as a doctor, to try and manage these diseases so you can have some semblance of a quality of life as you age.
That's what we're taught to believe, right?
That's where we're taught to believe. You know that. And so I believe that too, because nobody taught me in medical school where disease came from, or that it could be suspended, prevented, or even reversed. Mm-hmm. There was a day in my practice, a woman was sitting on the exam table, and she said, Dr. Stoll, can't you help me? I'm falling apart. And I just asked a simple question: what does falling apart mean to you? And I was expecting something on her past medical history list, complications from surgery, complications or side effects from medications. But she really caught me off guard when she said, my marriage is falling apart because my husband is tired of taking care of me. Mm-hmm. And then she said, I can't travel to see my grandchildren because I'm sick. I can't attend church. We're facing financial bankruptcy because of the cost of my care. Yeah. I'm depressed and I don't have any friends. And then with tears running down her cheeks, she looked at me and said, can you help me? Wow. And in that moment, I felt completely helpless. Nobody had ever taught me how to put somebody's life back together again. And I didn't even know if it was possible. So it sent me on a personal learning journey that eventually took me to the place of understanding that diet is foundational to not only the prevention of disease, but the reversal of disease. And when we begin reversing disease, we begin restoring quality of life, that health span, the quality of life as long as possible, so that we can maximize, the relationships and the calling in our lives that God has given us. And so, from that came this amazing revelation that changed our family.
Well, I love that. And I love your wife, Kristen, and she is very wise. And I'm glad she set you on this trajectory of what you are doing today, because you and all of you are making a great impact. And so thank you. So I mentioned in your bio that I love the Game Changers documentary. There's a few documentaries out there that I'm like, oh, snoozeville. This one is such a great documentary because it follows athletes, and you're really learning how a whole food plant-based lifestyle, not only can they survive a whole food whole food, plant-based lifestyle. Let me say that 5 times fast, but they thrive. So as a former athlete yourself, would you have even believed that a whole food, plant-based lifestyle could have helped your overall performance as a bobsled, Olympic bobsledder? I mean, would you have even considered it?
No, I wouldn't have considered it back then.
No.
Kind of they say in that space, the bro science of
Yeah.
sports is, a big piece of steak, lots of protein, make sure you're getting more than enough protein, have a protein drink to make sure that you got enough protein, because that's the fundamental foundation of sports nutrition.
And even not, and I just want to put I want to put a pin in that real quick, because it's not just athletes that think that they need so much protein. It's the average person that thinks, I need all this protein. Let's just dive into that as you're sharing your story about the myths behind that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We have become so focused on that macronutrient of protein in our society. The word protein means of prime importance. And so it is important. It fundamentally is a foundation of our bodies. But we've then gone to the next step with saying that protein comes from animals, and not believing that protein comes from anywhere else, and not understanding that it's the way the protein is packaged that really impacts our health.
Yes.
And so, as I was an athlete, even at the Olympic Training Center, the food there was still not healthy. And I would work out really hard every day. And like so many people, I believe that, I was in the balancing of calories mindset. I burned 5,000 calories today. Therefore, I can have 2 or 3
dessert.
bars. Dessert times 3.
Yeah. Oh my.
And, I was playing the calorie balance game, and, for every person, you'll never win that game, because we always overestimate the number of calories that we burn, and we grossly underestimate the calories that we burn off when we're exercising. So, and then we never stop to think of the impact of those calories inside of our body. It seems to be like this static equation. It's just, adding and subtracting to the calorie balance. But what we don't know and don't realize is that those calories come with a significant physiologic impact within 2 to 3 hours of eating. For instance, when you're eating unhealthy foods, they found if you eat a sausage McMuffin in the morning, within 3 to 4 hours of eating that food, it causes your blood vessels to constrict. It decreases blood flow to the brain and causes inflammation in your body within 3 to 4 hours. In fact, some of the components of that sausage will find its way all the way down to your DNA within 4 hours.
Wow.
And start turning on switches for inflammation. But the benefit is, if you get protein from plants, say you have, a bean burrito with greens or something for breakfast in place of your egg McMuffin, those nutrients in that bean burrito with greens will actually cause your blood vessels to open up within 2 to 3 hours. It will increase the blood flow to your brain. It will turn off key inflammatory switches in your body and feed the bacteria that live in your gut, all within the same period of time. And so there's a very real impact to the way that you feel, your short-term health, your vitality and energy and mental clarity, and your long-term health when you eat with that kind of a dietary pattern over the long haul.
Yeah, so every meal does matter.
Athletic piece. Every meal does matter. That's right. Your food is never neutral. There's always a positive or a negative impact from the food that you eat.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know that as an athlete, and I suffered some of the consequences, even though, like most athletes, I believed that I was kind of the epitome of health. Strong, 5% body fat, fast. But the impacts were getting sick. My immune function was down. And so, I would get sick when I was traveling. Recovery, it took me longer to recover. There's injury that happens when your body's inflamed and your body can't repair. So you're at greater risk for torn muscles and torn tendons. Mental clarity, there's a fog that comes when we don't eat well. In fact, they found that we have neuroinflammation in our brains within 2 to 4 hours of eating food. Again, they took a group of just normal participants and gave them a meat-based diet, and they had inflammation in their brains in 2 to 4 hours. And
Wow.
that inflammation impacted their social disconnectedness and feelings of depression, 2 to 4 hours. So their
You almost
brains
said
were
social distancing, but that causes social distancing.
it does. You
You
feel
know?
depressed, you social
Right.
distance. That's right. Yeah, so I didn't know that that impacted my body in those significant ways that would have actually improved my performance.
That's such a good message because a lot of people, they look at themselves in the mirror and they've got the six-pack abs, they look amazing, they're strong. And yet, if you could turn your body inside out and see how it was really operating, they would probably think differently if they weren't eating healthy. But we're on the same page in terms of whole food, plant-based. But do you find that there's just so much confusion? I mean, I know I do. People are asking questions all the time. There's just so much confusion due to the mass push of conflicting dietary information from leading doctors and health experts and athletes that are encouraging things like take a shot of olive oil, add butter to coffee, or meat is good for you as long as it's, grass fed. So what do you say to all this?
It's confusing.
Yeah,
It's very
right.
confusing. When I started my learning journey, it's confusing even for scientists and healthcare providers and very smart people. It's confusing because so many experts have amazing testimonies of people that changed their life. They have science to back them up,
Right.
bibliographies, there are books. And so they present this evidence and it looks great at the outset. But what most people don't understand is that, the way the studies are constructed, the outcome measures that are being evaluated, and the data may not take into account the bigger picture.
And maybe who
Health,
funded that
vitality,
study,
and
right?
disease reversal. And you are right, Wendie. And who funded the study. And sometimes that's difficult because, people will, some of these organizations will work through secondary or tertiary organizations for funding to keep their presence hidden. And so there's a lot of deception even in the data. And that's why it is so confusing. I think, for the average person, if we try to think about health and diet in the larger context, that a dietary pattern of what we eat on a daily basis will impact all of your cells over a lifetime. And, if we're trending towards foods, whole plant foods grown in the ground, the way that God created them, those foods always enable health all the way down to your DNA.
That's so good. It's, I think people are scared, not just confused, but they're scared because they don't want to make the wrong move. And so on top of the confusion, and the more they do research on their own, the more algorithms are pushing that same kind of information to them. So they think, well, no, I'm right, you're wrong. And it becomes this, whether it's political or nutrition or whatever you're looking up online, you're going to get fed more of it. So when it comes to that, what would you tell the average person to do when they are trying to really discern for themselves? And I know you would say prayer and meditation, but over and beyond that, when in their research, what would you tell them to do? The smartest way to discern for themselves how to eat?
Yes, it's finding good people like yourself that are trustworthy, continuing to look for information. And you all, as a part of Wendie's audience, are so blessed to have Wendie as a life coach in your lives. And I know you know this, but I'm just telling you that she is amazing. She always is seeking the truth, and you'll find reliable, consistent, trustworthy information from Wendie Pett. So it is finding, amazing, trustworthy people that are going to give you information without a secondary gain attached to it. And I think that's one of the, one of the challenges today is that, nutrition has become rife with marketing and advertising. And there are so many products and services and everything attached to nutrition supplements that it really becomes challenging to negotiate the marketing information that has been seeded with science versus the real information that actually leads you to a lifetime of health. And so just stepping back like into the bigger picture, we can look at several pieces of evidence that really give us good guidance. First, we just go back to the Word of God. And if we look in Genesis 1:29, the food system that God created for all life was plants. It was seed-bearing plants it was the grasses, it was fruit trees, it was plants supplying all of the nutrition for all of life. We don't see animal products show up until Genesis 9:3 in the antediluvian world after the flood. But people ate plants, animals ate plants. And so that should be the foundational information. And, it's really like the purpose of the gospel was to get us back into the garden relationship, relationship with God, garden relationship with creation, garden relationship to food. It's always going back to the garden. And so today we have such a rare opportunity because we have supermarkets and amazing agriculture that we can return to that kind of a diet. And many centuries before us, it wasn't possible. Second, we can look at population health. And there was an amazing book that I know you've probably talked about, the Blue Zones, where they looked at 5 people groups around the world that were the longest lived healthy people groups. And they studied those people groups. And they found that the core components of those societies included 95% plant-based diet, eating a cup of beans every day, living in supportive communities, being active, getting a good night's sleep, not stressing. The core components of a healthy lifestyle.
Wait, again, not stressing? Let's talk about that. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, going back to food in the garden.
Yeah, it all goes back to the garden. Even in the garden, there was the inherent eustress of like cultivating a garden and working, but not the distress of being overwhelmed and feeling like you have to carry it all on your own shoulders. And so we look at those people groups, all of those 5 people groups that really optimize their health. And we can look at large, studies of populations like the Seventh-day Adventists, where we see that population of people eating a plant-based diet have much lower rates of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, all of these things. So these large population studies give us greater clarity. And then what I like to do is dive down into the research that looks at disease reversal, because that's really the essence of where we find information on the benefits of a diet and then the activity of a diet on your cells. And so we see studies like Dr. Ornish, Dr. Esselstyn, and others that have shown reversal of heart disease, including opening of arteries, studies reversing diabetes, studies reversing autoimmune diseases, even things like lupus and multiple sclerosis. And when we dig into those studies, we see the impact of the food on the cellular physiology. And so what we see is that it reduces inflammation. It actually works on this lining of blood vessels to increase the health of those little cells called endothelial cells, which causes dilation, reduces the stickiness of platelets so we don't form clots, reduces the cancer-forming components in those blood vessels. And so the blood vessels become healthy. We see it changes our genes. And so not only are we healthy when we eat that way, but epigenetics teaches us when we eat healthy, it's a generational blessing for 2 or 3 generations. And so
yes, that's huge.
Plants have that epigenetic generational blessing that gets passed on. We see when we eat plants, it changes the microbiome, the 50 to 100 trillion bacteria that live in our gut. And when that gets healthy, it boosts our immune system. 75% of the health of our immune system is founded in that microbiome. We see it turns on cells to regenerate tissue, our stem cells. Every part of our body, including our brains, there's new blood flow to the brain, new brain cell development. All of these things happen when we begin eating plants. And so as we dive down into the cellular physiology, all the way down to the DNA with a plant-based diet, we see the impact that wherever you look, it's like turning over rocks. And every time you turn over a rock, you discover that works too. Every time we learn something new about the body, all the complexities of biochemistry, and we study diet on those complexities, it gets healthy too, which shouldn't be a surprise to us because we simply go back to the understanding in the garden that the Creator created our bodies to be optimized on this diet that He created in the garden. And when we eat that diet, we shouldn't be surprised that it turns on every possible regenerative capacity in our bodies and turns off those cells that would be damaging, lead to disease, turns off inflammation or anything that would contribute to disease in our body. So, it's the bigger picture. It's that umbrella, I think, that gives us clarity and confidence moving forward with our dietary pattern of whole food plant-based.
Yes, I love that. You are just a wealth of information. You're so wise and so humble as well. And that's one of the things I love about you and your family. You're all just very in tune and touch, but you're very humble. What I'll say is a lot of people do talk about biblical health, and I'm curious if they ever talk about, well, what about the promised land? You know, the land of milk and honey. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, I hear so many of these questions. And,
Yeah.
I think, it's just, I think what happens is that we start to try to read into certain scriptures
Uh-huh.
to find dietary suggestions rather than just understanding the context of the scripture. And I've been asked that question many times, the land
I
of milk and
figured.
honey. And we have a
We want to
paradigm where we read
justify.
into that and say, yeah, oh, so that means that they went into the land because there was a lot of milk to drink and a lot of honey to eat.
Yeah.
But in reality, in my understanding, in reading some of the Jewish scholars as they've talked about that, what it's describing is a land of abundant agriculture. That
Hmm.
there's so many blossoming fruit trees and flowers that the bees have overabundance of honey. So it speaks to the abundance of the flowering trees. And the milk, when you graze cows in a rich green field, they have so much milk that it almost just leaks out. So it speaks to the abundance of the milk that's produced by cattle and other animals to feed their young.
Yeah,
And
that's
so it's
good.
just, it really is speaking to the agricultural richness of the region, but not as a dietary recommendation. And we just have to always be so careful that we don't, put different lenses on when we read the
That's
Bible and
right.
just find things to justify what we're doing today.
Right. Like I'll take that scripture and make that mine, but yet you don't look at the scriptures before or after to see the full context. So that's good. Well, speaking of agriculture, you are very involved with Rodell Institute and you're working on a pretty big project with them. But let's talk about B12. Let's talk about how that is important that we are taking a B12, a quality B12 supplement if you're whole food plant based, and just how the soil is depleted and talk about that. And then also the project that you're working on.
Okay, yeah. I just, at the outset of this, one comment that, there is no perfect diet
Right.
because we live in an imperfect world.
Yes.
And so every single diet needs to be well planned and well organized. If we look at even omnivore standard American diet, we have fortified foods. We put vitamin D in milk. It's not there naturally. There's
Mm-hmm.
iodine in milk because they use iodine to clean the udders. I mean, we have these components in our food, we fortified flours, because there is no perfect diet, partially because of the fall, but secondarily because of the way that we have stewarded agriculture and the land.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at, to start with just vitamin B12 actually comes from soil organisms. There are bacteria that live in the soil, the same types of bacteria that live in your gut, which is always such an interesting revelation that we came from the soil
Yes.
and we are very much like the soil, including the bacteria that live in our gut. So these little bacteria that live in healthy soil create vitamin B12. And throughout most of human history, people were eating food from soil that was naturally organic, that contained microorganisms that were producing vitamin B12. And so when they picked a carrot, wiped it off on their shirt and ate it, they
Ate
got
it.
some soil and they got B12.
Yeah.
Also, that soil would run off into the rivers and springs and their water naturally contained vitamin B12. So
We're
people were
too
getting
clean
vitamin
now.
B12 from a lot.
We're way
We
too
are way too
clean.
clean. Right. We've sterilized our soils with pesticides and herbicides that
Mhm.
kill the bacteria that don't produce any more vitamin B12. And then we irradiate our food. And so there is no access to natural soil organisms that would replenish your gut and natural soil organisms that would produce vitamin B12. And the same thing with water. So some of the natural sources of vitamin B12 have been eliminated because of our modernization of the food supply chain. But all of this really started just in the 20th century as we started to ramp up food production to feed more people. And using technology in farming is not disadvantageous. It can be good, but it's always the philosophy that follows. that can be damaging. And the philosophy, coming out of World War II with the advent of kind of the chemical business was that, better living through chemistry. And so as people started to grow more food, actually to feed more animals, they were growing food and noticing that there were weeds. And so they started to spray the weeds, and they, in essence, killed the organisms in the soil that contribute to the health of the plant. So now they had, plants with no weeds, but weak plants that were dying, being attacked by bugs, because when a plant is not healthy, it actually secretes into the air pheromones that would attract pests to kill it. Now we have to spray pesticides, and in the feedlots, because they're putting animals so close together, we had the rise of all kinds of flies and mosquitoes. We started spraying DDT, which went off into the groundwater and sterilized the streams and the land. And then on top of that, we discovered that rather than covering the soil, all the way back to the garden, we have to be covered. We were under the original covering by God. We lost our covering, gained a covering in Christ. The same thing with the soil. Soil needs to be covered. If it's not covered, it erodes away and dies. And so we started tilling and plowing our fields and disking them and exposing that soil and the microorganisms to the UV light, which killed them. So now we have sterilized soil exposed to the elements, which contributes to erosion and the dust bowls back in the 40s.
Wow.
Today, we're losing a dump truck load of topsoil down the Mississippi into the Gulf of Mexico every single second.
Oh my
we have
word.
a massive global erosion problem because of our farming techniques, and it's even worse in third world countries because we've exported modern agribusiness into the third world countries, which creates lots of problems and food scarcity. So the answer is, again, just going back to the original plan. Land was designed to be covered. If you look at the forest floor, it's covered. It's covered with leaves and sticks. And if you dig down into that soil, it's rich and dark and full of worms and all kinds of life. Food was meant, our land was meant to be covered. And organizations like the Rodale Institute have promoted regenerative agriculture since the 1950s. Regenerative agriculture uses cover crops to cover the soil, protects the soil, avoids erosion. As those cover crops die, they replenish the organisms within the soil, and they produce much more abundant plants, but they also protect the soil for future generations.
Wow.
And just an example, I'll just finish with this, that as an example of the benefits of the organic agriculture, not just in protecting the soil, preventing the use of herbicides and pesticides, which do run off into streams and lakes and impact and aquatic life, amphibians, all these other aspects of life. There are real benefits for us that are eating these plants, and they're just doing a study right now called the Vegetable Systems Trial, where they planted side by side conventional crops with organic crops, literally just feet apart, and they are measuring the antioxidants, the micronutrients that are in the organic crops and the conventional crops. And so they've sent these off to the lab. They used purple potatoes for this first round. And in the organic crops, the purple potatoes grown in organic soil, same exact conditions. They looked at 26 different phytochemicals and found that they were between 100 and 700 times more available and present in organic than in conventional.
Wow. Fascinating.
And when we were looking, just harkening back to our conversation about disease reversal and prevention, it's the micronutrients, it's those antioxidants, and it's the fiber in those plants that really have an impact on our health. And so if you're getting 100 to 700 times more breakfast, lunch, and dinner over the course of 10 years, that has to have an impact on our bodies. So for many reasons, it's beneficial.
It is. And Dr. Stoll, I'm fascinated by that. And I think people listening are like, whoa, this is way over my head. And yet, how can I make a difference? How can I be a part? How can I make an impact in this particular issue that's going on in the world? And maybe you have a place that they could go and check into it and be a part. I don't know. But I think it's fascinating to see that those two vegetables grown side by side, and of course, go organic always, spend the money because it makes a difference in your cellular health. So how can someone make an impact? Can they?
Oh, absolutely. This is the great news that all of us can make an impact, and together we can actually bring incredible transformation, because every single day we all make decisions about what types of food we're going to purchase. And so we are voting with our dollars every single day.
Yes.
And I just want to take a pause. We'll come right back to that point because this is so important. I've encouraged people for many years to start thinking about your food purchases, not as an expenditure in your budget, but as an investment. So move it out of the expenditure category in your budget, actually to your investment category, because it is absolutely true.
We're going to tell that to Dave Ramsey with the envelope system.
That's right. That's a good. That's right.
I love that.
There's short and long-term return on investment in that money.
Yes.
And I can show you that you will save money in every single way, especially as you get older, because you're investing in that category. But if we also just think about our role on earth as followers of Christ, that we're called to bring his kingdom. We're called to bring solutions. We're called to bring restoration while we're here. And part of that role is stewardship, that, we're not consumers. We're not here to exploit creation. We are here to steward creation and to make it as beautiful as we possibly can, and to regenerate while we have an opportunity. And so by simply voting every single day with our dollars to purchase food from local farmers, to support those local farm families that are using organic regenerative practices, buying food at farmers markets, finding local farms and shopping at those farm markets. It's a beautiful way to connect with people, get to know the families around you and support them. And you get to know their children and you see how they're investing in their lives. And we do that every Saturday, Friday and Saturday here in Franklin.
I love that.
When you go to the store, you can also look to buy from local farms or buy from regenerative agriculture farms. And in that way, you are investing in those families and in the stewardship of soil for future generations.
That's so good. I love that. And of course, have your own garden. That's very healing as well. I've got just a couple more quick questions. I know we're short on time, but one question that I get a lot is, as you know, lectins are proteins that bind carbohydrates, and they're found in legumes and nightshades and certain grains and that kind of thing. So people are always questioning, well, what about lectins? Because I've heard that they're bad. And so being on a whole food plant-based diet, I can't eat that. So can we talk on that just briefly? I know we're short on time, but that's a big question.
Yeah. It is a big question because there's some very popular books
and studies and yep.
Insight. And actually, when you look at the studies on lectins, there are not that many studies that would indicate lectins are going to impact your health. There's only been one study that I'm aware of where the consumption of beans actually caused an illness, and it was undercooked beans in a hospital that caused an illness. Other than that, there are no studies that I'm aware of today that would tie lectins to disease. It's a hypothetical argument, but there's no research behind it. And the other interesting thing to understand is that when you cook foods, especially cooked beans or lentils, it completely disables lectins, so they have no impact on our bodies. So consuming beans and lentils has actually been shown in hundreds of studies to reduce risk of all lifestyle related diseases, to reduce inflammation, and to improve health. And in fact, the one component of all of those 5 people groups that we talked about earlier, the one component of their diets that was directly tied to health was the consumption of a cup of beans every single day. And so, there's no evidence on the research side. It's a hypothetical argument, but on the other side, when we actually look at the research around beans and lentils and vegetables, there's tremendous evidence from every aspect of the physiologic research to the population research that the consumption of vegetables, beans, and lentils reduces disease and improves health. And then finally, just to reiterate that piece, when you cook them, the lectins are no longer viable. And so cooked beans and lentils are actually very healthy. And it was very telling that the author of one of these books was on the doctor's show, and talking about lectins and how they impact your body. But in Q&A later, he admitted that he eats beans every single day.
What? I didn't know that.
Because he knows. Yeah, you can look it up. It's on there.
That's interesting.
On the doctor's show.
Yeah.
But because the lectins don't cause a problem after they've been cooked, and he knows that beans are actually good for you.
Interesting. Well, 2 more questions. One is, what do you think the hidden pitfall is that keeps people from succeeding in a whole food plant-based lifestyle?
Oh boy, this is such a good question. We can come back and tackle this another. This is.
We should have a part two. A part two.
We'll have a part two because this is the most important. But I'll just I'll set it up this way.
Okay.
For so long we have been told you are what you eat, and that's true, but that's not where health begins. Then we're told you are what you think, and that's true. And thinking is important, and the words that we speak is important. But where health begins and our choices around diet really become driven is what we believe. You are what you believe. And so this is really important for us as believers. It's important for us in understanding health because out of belief comes conviction.
Yes.
If you don't have belief, you won't have conviction, you won't have motivation. So you may think or have an intellectual understanding of diet, but if you don't really believe it, you won't have the conviction and you'll make different choices. We can have an intellectual understanding of Christianity, but if we don't really believe it, we won't have conviction. We won't make the right choices. So your health, everything that you do in life goes back to what you believe. And it's, we're not often taught to really take a good look at what we actually believe because we think a lot of things, but it's the belief that drives conviction. So if we look at our convictions, or sometimes we look at the places in our life where we don't have convictions, it will lead us back to areas in our life where we can begin to ask ourselves, what do I believe to be true about whole food plant-based diet? What do I believe to be true about my place in this world as a Christian? And by asking those questions and seeking out answers, we can really clarify our belief systems. And when we believe the right way, we will have convictions and you'll always make the right choice, even in difficult situations. As an example, I was just reading in the book of Acts, I've been studying it the last month, and you read about Stephen, and he knew his identity was founded and rooted in the belief who he knew he was in Christ. And so when he was brought before those Jewish leaders, and they were hurling all kinds of accusations against him and lies and bringing false witnesses against him, he didn't even defend himself because he was listening to the Holy Spirit. He knew who he was. His convictions were that he was absolutely safe and secure in Christ. And he was able to stand even in the midst of that assembly. And when they looked at his face, he glowed like an angel. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't trying to defend himself because he had the conviction to know who he was and who was taking care of him, and that it was all going to work out because Christ was there with him.
That's such a good reminder.
What ends up driving us in our food decisions. It's not just learning more, it's learning and believing that this is the right way. And when we learn and believe it's the right way, no matter where you go, you'll figure it out. That's what we've seen. You've seen that with so many of your clients. When they really believe it's true, they figure it out. Airports, traveling, you figure it out.
Yes, you do. You do. And
you're convicted to solve it.
You would be so proud of Keegan, Scott, because he's, in the Space Force right now, and all of his buddies are making fun of him because he's eating salads with every meal, and they're eating the cheeseburgers and whatever, and he's eating really healthy. So, what we do does create a ripple effect. So I love that. I love that. I know you'd be proud. So no matter how much he's getting picked on, he's still doing it. Well, let's because he knows, right? He does. He believes it true. He's seen it long enough. So let's end on this fun note because I know you well. Others listening may not, but I want to know something that maybe I don't know about you, or maybe nobody knows about you. Something fun, something unique. What's something that you want to share that might be just kind of a fun little Dr. Stoll fact?
What's kind of fun is that we still love sledding. So whenever we get snow, we sled. Even my wife and I will go sledding.
I've seen those videos. They're fun.
So, we had some snow in Tennessee and some ice this year, and my wife and I were out on the sled, going down the hill and having the time of our lives. So we love to have fun any and every way, and the greatest joy is doing it with my wife.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you, Dr. Stoll, and give my love and regards to Kristen and the kids. And he's got 6 kids, by the way, and 3 grandkids. So they are very busy. So God bless you, my friend. Thank you for being on Visibly Fit, and thank you for sharing your wealth of information. And people can go and find out more about you at drscottstoll.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, and also the Plantrician Project.
Yes.
Plantricianproject.org. There's lots of great resources there.
Huge.
And at the Rodale Institute .org, there's information about our regenerative health project there. So
Awesome.
I'd love to connect with you in every way. And I just want to thank you, Wendie, for inviting me to be here. You are such a wonderful friend. And I just love to support you in every way, and just want to speak blessings over your continued work, and everybody that's watching this podcast. I just speak a blessing over your life, that your life would abound in every way, and that you would walk into a greater encounter with the living Jesus Christ, and that his light would be magnificent through your life as you impact the world around you.
Oh, thank you. God bless you.
Well, that's a wrap for today's show, so thank you so much for tuning in. I love spending this time with you. To learn more and get more free resources, just head on over to wendiepett.com, and thank you in advance for sharing this episode and this podcast, following and subscribing not only to this podcast, but finding me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you are, I'm probably there too. Until next week and our next podcast time together, make it a Visibly Fit day.